However you are and whenever you are, welcome, good souls of the planet and beyond to Paranormal Now. I'm Alan B. Smith. Join us as we traverse the cosmic highway of paranormal portals and tantalizing turnoffs. Joining me tonight is the one and only Michael Cremo, and we will be talking about forbidden archaeology. And even with all the advancements in science and paleontology and in archaeology, the battle still continues as to what is being hidden, metaphorically, so to speak, because so much of what Michael has discovered is right out there in the open. And there are just many that continue to turn a blind eye, but perhaps the page is turning in Michael's favor. And we'll talk more about that in just a moment. Of course, a friendly reminder, in the last 30 minutes, the paranormal radio app lines will be open. So if you want to call in, that number is 855-472-5483. And that is 855-472-5483. Call in. Bill Skywatcher, our producer, he'll get you on the line. Stand by. Remember, if you have your player playing in the background, to turn that volume down so we don't get a feedback, and we'll get you on the line and you can ask Michael or myself your questions. Before we get to Michael, I have some really fun news that just dropped today. I was texted by director Jeremy Norrie, and he just shared with me that he has completed a documentary called Aliens versus Bigfoot, of which I was participant in and interviewed for. Not exactly the expression I would put on a Bigfoot, but I think it exemplifies the battle of cryptids and ufology, and the different points of view. Mine being much different than what you see in that image. So I want to thank Jeremy Norrie for including me. If you go to imdb.com and just search for Aliens versus Bigfoot, you can check out the new documentary there. There's 2 trailers. So yeah, go check it out. And there's more coming from Jeremy as well in regard to his documentaries. So I will share that as we go. Updates how you can watch the film. Right now, it only released on one platform, which you have to rent. So I'm just holding off before I share any direct links with you, because I do believe that the documentary will be available for free on certain platforms. So stand by. We'll keep you posted. And a friendly reminder, if you're in the Northeast, please check out the UFO Monument Park in Sheffield, Massachusetts, a really beautiful area. And now that we're getting into springtime, thank goodness, the pounds and mounds of snow on the streets of New York are but little molehills. And so we can actually move around with our cars and our feet and our trains much better. And spring is on its way. So if we can just keep this mild bridge of warm weather for another 2 weeks, we're almost there. And it's funny, around this time every year, I would say probably the end of February, I start to get a little bit of the winter blues, and I've been feeling it lately. So this warm weather here in the Northeast, oh my gosh, I'm just so thankful for. And a friendly reminder, in the last half an hour, those paranormal radio apps will be open for the hotline, and that is 85-KGRA Live. Michael A. Cremo is Research Associate in History of Archaeology. He is a member of the World Archaeological Congress since 1993. His WAC3 paper, Puranic Time and Archaeological Record, was published in the Routledge One World Archaeology series, volume Time and Archaeology, 1999, edited by Tim Murray. He is also a member of the European Association of Archaeologists. In 2004, Cremo's paper, The Later Discoveries of Boucher des Perth at Moulin-Quignon and Their Impact at the Moulin-Quignon Jaw Controversy, presented at the 20th International Congress for History of Science, Liège, Belgium, was published in a conference proceedings volume of this Congress by the scientific publisher Braypoles. Cremo is the principal author of the book Forbidden Archaeology, a comprehensive historical survey of archaeological anomalies. In a review with British Journal for History of Science, Tim Murray said the book provides the historian of archaeology with a useful compendium of case studies, in the history of sociology of scientific knowledge, which can be used to foster debate within archaeology about how to describe the epistemology of one's discipline. Cremo is particularly interested in examining the history of archaeology from the standpoint of alternative worldviews, particularly worldviews with foundations in ancient Indian thought. Michael Cremo, welcome to Paranormal Now.
Good to be here.
Good to have you on here. Very exciting. Myself and so many other people out there are fans of your work, and you are, one of the, bigwigs, as it were, in alternative archaeology, and you've really helped move that discussion along. How did you get involved in alternative archaeology in the first place?
Well, that has a little bit to do with the way I was raised. My father was an intelligence officer in the Air Force, and that meant a couple things for me as I was growing up. One thing was that we were traveling around a lot in the United States and other countries, and I got exposed to a lot of different worldviews. And what I found really interesting about them was that they had accounts of human populations existing on this earth at far greater times in the past than modern science allows. Most modern scientists today think humans like us came into existence less than 300,000 years ago. But these ancient wisdom texts, including those from the Vedic culture of India, tell of human populations existing millions and millions of years ago. Mm-hmm. So I had to wonder, are these accounts mythology, or is there perhaps some factual basis for them? So that's what got me looking into archaeology, the science of human origins. And if you look in the current textbooks of archaeology, you don't see any evidence for extreme human antiquity. You only see the discoveries that support the now dominant theories. But I decided, okay, let me look beyond the textbooks. Let me start digging into the original scientific reports published by archaeologists and geologists and paleontologists. And when I did that, I started finding many of them were reporting discoveries of human bones, human artifacts, human footprints going back tens of millions, even hundreds of millions of years in some cases. So it was something completely different than I ever heard from any of my teachers in high school or university. Mm-hmm. So I had to kind of wonder, well, what's going on here? Why is this information in the original scientific reports and it's not in the textbooks today? And I've concluded it's because of a process of knowledge filtration that operates in the world of science.
The millions of years ago footprints, that's probably one of the most controversial aspects, I think, of your work, because, it's one thing to say human civilization existed 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 million years ago, because we know the paleontological record is evolving or expanding. But to say 10 plus million years ago, that's a really big leap. How did you get there?
Well, I was prepared to accept it as a possibility. Somehow, I don't know if you can hear the background noise, but I live in Los Angeles, and there's a street nearby called Venice Boulevard, and it just sounded like a motorcycle troop was going by. So I'm sorry if there was some background noise
that's
there.
All right. My wife and I had visited Venice briefly years ago, and the one thing I remember were these amazing bear claw almond croissants at a local bakery. And it was the night of the election when Bush was against Kerry. So it was quite some time ago. But it was a really pretty part of town. At the time, I don't think I would have stayed and lived there. But I heard that it has really moved up. Is it a better community, a safer community now?
I'm not actually in the Venice neighborhood. Venice Boulevard does go from the beaches all the way to the center of LA. So I'm kind of somewhere in between that. I'm not in the more bohemian Venice community, you could say.
You're not hanging out at Muscle Beach, right?
No, not at the moment. But where were we? You were asking about why I was open to the possibility that human civilizations and human beings may have existed in the very distant past. And that has to do with my studies in the sacred teachings of different traditions, especially the Vedic tradition of India, where you have a category of literature called the Puranas. And Purana means ancient, so it's a word, it means histories, basically. And in these histories, there are elaborate descriptions of human civilizations and human populations that existed in the past. And, they had an advanced kind of technology. They had spacecraft called Vimanas, which, when you read the descriptions of them, are very much like the things reported by modern UFO researchers. So, but whatever the level of culture of a civilization is, the first thing is you have to have human beings or human-like beings to be part of that civilization. So that's what I've kind of focused on in my work, showing that there is evidence that humans like us have existed for far longer than the 300,000 years that most scientists today accept. As far as civilization goes, they would say, well, that first started maybe 5,000 years ago, 5 or 6,000 years ago. But I think both of these things, human populations and advanced civilizations, have existed for a long, long time. But there have been periodic devastations that take place that kind of wipe things out, and everything has to be rebooted.
Right. Like the Noah's flood.
That's an example of a devastation, but there have been others as well.
Sure. Now, have you been convinced at all that there is any probability that rather than high civilization for humans, that in fact these are ancient aliens?
Well, I appeared a few times on a show that appears on the History Channel, Ancient Aliens. I have an expanded conception of what it means to be an alien or an extraterrestrial, an ET. This depends on understanding what a human being really is. Some will say, well, we're just machines made of molecules, but I think there's more to it than that. I think there is a conscious self that is different than the body. It is not made of molecules. It's made of its own element, consciousness, which I see as not being a byproduct of chemical activity in the brain, but an independent substance. And that conscious self is not from the world of matter where we find ourselves now. So it's from some higher level of reality. And that means a human body or any other type of body is a vehicle for a conscious self, which comes from some higher level of reality, which means, in that sense, we're all extraterrestrials. None of us are from here.
But in terms of biological, so we have human beings here on this planet. Is there a, do you think that human beings were the ones that built this high tech? Did they get help? Or was it someone else? Or are you on the fence about it?
I think extraterrestrial beings were involved. Yes, that now people will have, in different wisdom traditions, they'll have different kinds of names for these extraterrestrial beings. They may call them angels, they may call them demigods, they may call them whatever.
Mhm.
But if you look at the descriptions, they come from somewhere else within the universe, and they interact with human populations. So if you look at these different ancient wisdom traditions, for example, in the Vedic literature, you'll find accounts of personalities existing on this earth who have terrestrial mothers, celestial fathers. In other words, fathers from somewhere else, ETs.
Mhm.
So there are hybrid beings on this planet. Of course, from the modern UFO abduction accounts, you get a similar kind of information. So
Mhm.
one thing I'm very interested in is the parallels between the modern alien UFO extraterrestrial research and the information that is contained in ancient wisdom traditions. And I find there are a lot of such parallels, which is interesting because it suggests that this phenomenon has been going on for a long, long, long time.
Is this almost a ontological or spiritual search for you?
For me, yes, it's. I consider it. Yeah, I practice a kind of yoga and meditation, and I consider all of this research to be part of my yoga. It's one of the principles of the path of yoga that I follow is that you should take whatever talent or ability that you have, whether it's for writing or painting or whatever, and use it in such a way that it's beneficial for you and beneficial for others. So I think otherwise, why would I be talking about these things? I have to ask myself.
Right. Yeah.
If I didn't think it were helpful for people to have this information,
Mhm.
why would I do it? Why would I spend time writing about it and speaking about it? I don't have any particular interest myself to profit by it in any way, but I just think it's information that's worth putting out there. And some people seem to agree.
Well, yeah, I think a lot of people agree, and probably some privately agree. And I have a question here from the comment section from Rodrigo. How does extreme human antiquity affect the theory of evolution?
Well, it contradicts the current theory, but it doesn't rule out another kind of evolution. If actually, when I first published the book, Forbidden Archaeology, one of the architects of the current dominant theory wrote to me and said, if the evidence that you speak about in this book is true, it would create huge problems for our theory of human evolution. And not just the human evolution, but evolution in general. And I think that's true. If you have evidence that humans have always been present on this planet, which I think we do have, that definitely contradicts the theory of evolution as it's understood at the present moment. But there's another kind of evolution, and that depends on understanding that the conscious self, some people in religious terminology might call that a soul, but the basic idea is that the human body is a vehicle for a conscious self, as are other types of bodies, plant and animal bodies. So there may be an evolution of the conscious self through different kinds of bodies, say maybe starting out in an ape or monkey body, next going to an ape man body, like a Neanderthal or a Homo erectus or whatever, and then to an anatomically modern human body. So that's the kind of evolution that I accept, an evolution of consciousness, not of matter.
Sure. So if the human body is a vehicle for a consciousness, if the human body is also a vehicle for a virus, right? Is consciousness a vehicle for something else, even further out there?
That's a really interesting question. But you know, I mean, here's something that could possibly happen. I think our experience tells us that conscious beings are individual and personal. If each member of the audience who's listening today is conscious, individual, and personal, each of us here, myself, you, Bill Skywatcher, we all experience ourselves as conscious, individual, and personal. So that's why we have different ideas. That's why we have questions and answers, dialogue, because we're individuals. We're not just conscious, we're individual and personal. Now, it may happen, however, that, and this takes you into the paranormal research area.
Sure.
There's a literature on possession where another conscious self may decide to take over the body that my conscious self is occupying. So that's
then we get into the question of who are you?
Somehow there's a little distortion there. Could you repeat the question?
That gets into the question then, who are you, right?
That is the big question. Now, most people tend to identify with whatever material body they happen to be occupying in this lifetime. But the conscious self survives the death of the body. There's something to be said for the idea of reincarnation or transmigration of the conscious self from one to another. So it is an interesting question. You could imagine an actor who is playing different roles in different films. In one film, he or she is playing this character, really gets into it. The next film, another character. The next film, another character. Sometimes actors have to go into psychiatric treatment, to find it, because they lose track of who they really are, apart from the roles that they play in the different movies. So you're talking about a very important question. And I think it is the ultimate question.
Well,
Who
Mike,
am I really?
let's hold it there with the ultimate question, and we'll continue this conversation on the other side of this break. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Yeah, we were getting a little spiritual, but we will continue on with all things related to forbidden archaeology, and that's what we love about this stuff. It all overlaps, it intersects. And Michael Cremo is one of the best people out there to have this conversation with. Alan B. Smith for Paranormal Now. I will see you on the flip side.
Intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now. The Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
Are you still at it?
Yeah, I need more speed.
This baby's fast.
My dad's fast. He's scary fast.
You really think you could beat him?
Yeah, because I drink more tea than he does.
Yeah, right.
You know, pal, it's the tea that makes you go.
Oh. Hey, Dad.
You know, kiddo, you have to drink a lot more tea to be faster than me.
Drink the tea that makes you go. Life Change Tea. You may not need as much as Dad. You never know. GetTheTea.com. Log on to GetTheTea.com.
Welcome to the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, thekgradb.com. Here you'll find great new content, including the KGRA Classics, great shows from our archives. You'll be able to see the show times and information so you can see what show is currently on air. The on-air live button, so just go to this section and you'll be able to hear the show live with exceptional sound quality. We also have the Vault section. Make sure to subscribe to get access to great content and special features. We have the make content for our latest news and events, so make sure to sign up and you can be part of our forum. So make sure to check out the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, thekgradb.com. We look forward to seeing you there, and we hope that you enjoy the new website.
Mainstream media's most wanted. KGRAradio.com.
Welcome back to Paranormal Now. This is Alan B. Smith with Michael Cremo tonight, and taking us out of the break is music by another Michael Hill from Septembrio. That's Septembrio spelled with a Y.com. Beautiful music, great musician, and really good person. So please check out Septembrio.com and download their music from wherever you listen on iTunes or Android or wherever. And in the last 30 minutes, reminder again, to call in the Paranormal Radio app line. It's 855-472-5483, because yes, we want to hear from you. Your voice matters, and you always ask fantastic questions, and I really appreciate that. Thank you for the comments in Facebook and on YouTube, as well as your call-in questions. So, Michael, we kind of left it at one of the biggest questions of all time. And I have to ask you, doing the work that you do, does it or has it helped you get any closer to those bigger questions, or does it simply widen the sphere for you?
Oh, it is helpful. It's, as I said, I regard this research into extreme human antiquity and related phenomena as part of my practice of yoga and meditation. So it is part of the process of self-discovery, you could say. It's almost like I'm digging into my heart, looking for my identity. You could say an archaeology, forbidden archaeology of the heart. But that's kind of esoteric.
Yeah. So what is the oldest evidence that you have found that puts us back well beyond the timeline as accepted by academia?
Well, there are a few cases. When you go really, really far back in time, the evidence is pretty sparse, and maybe it's not as well documented as one would like, but there are some pretty suggestive things that have come up. One of them is the round metallic spheres that are found in a mine in South Africa. They are about 1 or 2 inches in diameter. The interesting feature is the parallel grooves that go around the center, the equator of these round objects. And these objects are found in mineral deposits over 2 billion years old. The oldest footprints that I've found were discovered in Antelope Springs, Utah, and they are actually not naked footprints, but rather shoe prints, and they're about 500 million years old. The oldest human skeletal remains I've found in my research into the history of archaeology come from Macoupin County in the state of Illinois. They're described in a journal called The Geologist that was published in the year 1862. It told of a human skeleton that was found 90 feet below the surface of the ground. And above the skeleton, according to the report published in this scientific journal, there was a thick layer of slate rock. I mean, one of the usual explanations scientists give for a discovery like this is, well, it came from some higher level down through some fissure or crack or something. But the fact that above the skeleton was a solid layer of slate rock several feet thick kind of rules out that possibility.
So essentially you would have to have like a complete flip or some kind of 180 degree change of direction. I mean, how far do they reach in trying to explain that away?
Well, sometimes they go pretty far, but usually they don't give any evidence for what they're proposing. I remember once I was in Copenhagen, Denmark. I was giving a lecture there, and a scientist, an archaeologist from local university came. And during the question time, he was saying, don't you realize that this discovery that you're talking about, it could have been a mistake. There could have been a fissure or a crack through which the object came down. There could have been earth movements. I told him, it could be that you are a holographic projection from Mars. I mean, if you want to talk about anything that's possible, that's the kind of typical response to the kinds of evidence that I present in my talks, to present a list of possibilities how it could possibly be wrong. A scientific way to proceed is to show in that exact place, well, there is such a fissure, through which the object could have come down, that there are objects like that on some more recent level. So I don't know. I just don't accept that as a valid criticism. Sort of like, telling a child, you better not open that closet door and say you're hiding the Christmas presents there or something. Better not open up that closet door because there's a monster in there who's going to grab you. So.
Well, I think we have the title for your next book. Well, it could have been.
That's a good one.
So what could it be for you, right? So, I mean, it kind of goes both ways. Do you find yourself in a situation where, you think it could have been, but you can't quite find the evidence to support it?
I try to use evidence that is documented in scientific publications that deals, and then I look at all of the different kinds of reports. Some may express some doubt or whatever. And I give all sides of the story. If anybody goes through my book, Forbidden Archaeology, you'll see how I organize things. I give the pros, the cons, let people make up their own minds about it. I'm not pushing it on them. I say my personal opinion is there's evidence for extreme human antiquity, but I leave it up to each reader to make up their own mind whether they find the evidence persuasive or not.
These spheres that are 2 billion years old, found in mineral deposits. Now, knowing the timeline of our universe, our galaxy alone, is it possible that those spheres had nothing to do with humans? Because it does seem quite the reach that we would be around 2, plus billion years ago. Could it be a deposit or something left behind by another species, or is the indication that we left and came back?
Well, I'm happy that people think about how they would explain it. I have my personal ideas about it, but different people have proposed different ideas. Some people have proposed perhaps they were left by time travelers who went from the future to the past. Some have proposed extraterrestrial sources for these objects. Some have proposed, well, maybe there was some previous evolution of humans on this planet. And I'm really happy that people do that they think for themselves what makes sense to me. I'll be honest and just say, well, my explanation is humans like us were around for far longer than modern science now thinks possible. For me, it's like, say scientists send a space station into orbit around the Earth. They don't just hope that the chemicals in the air system of the space station will somehow combine together and produce astronauts to run the scientific instruments that are up there. No, they make a space station to put astronauts up there when they send it up. So it's I kind of think that our Earth, our solar system, our universe, they're not a cosmic accident. They have a purpose, and that purpose is the development of consciousness. And the way to develop consciousness is in the human form of life. So I think that opportunity has been here since the beginning. This idea that we're just an accident of cosmic evolutionary processes is something that I personally don't accept. Now, I respect the right of others to disagree with me and have their own convictions or alternatives. That's fine. But if somebody asks me personally, that's how I would interpret it. But as I said, I'm very happy that others are trying to account for this in other ways.
Are you excited about Mars' perseverance and ingenuity? What might be found up there?
They claim to be searching for evidence of life.
Mm-hmm.
That's a step in the right direction. However, I understand that there are NASA directives that they cannot search for human-like life. All right. So that's more what I'm interested in, and probably many other people are interested in. But at least they're looking for signs of life emerging from chemicals on Mars. So
wouldn't that be exciting nonetheless?
It is exciting. I think every planet is inhabited. I think Mars is inhabited now, but it may be that the creatures there are operating on a more subtle dimension with more subtle energies that enable them to remain unperceived if they wish to be.
If they wish to be, does that mean they're non-physical or something in between?
Physical, but subtly physical.
I have to ask you, because you're a man of evidence, what's the evidence for that? What have you seen to indicate that for you?
Well, first of all, we have to look at ourselves, and we'll see that we have three basic components: a gross physical body, a subtle material mind, and a non-physical conscious self. For example, we say all the time, oh, my mind is feeling satisfied today. My mind is feeling dissatisfied. So the I, that's the conscious self. The mind is the subtle material covering of the self, and it's linked to the gross physical body. Sort of like computer user is the conscious self. The computer software that enables a user to interact with the hardware is like the subtle mind element. And, the computer hardware, that's like the gross physical body. So if you get into paranormal research, you'll find that people are able to leave their gross physical bodies behind and travel to other places and observe things through their subtle material mental body. And this may happen in dreams, or it may happen for some people even in the waking state. So it may be that the entities which live on Mars are of a type that don't have gross physical bodies, but have subtle material bodies, kind of compared to our mental covering,
Sure.
mental body.
Yeah, I understand the explanation and hypothesis. What is on Mars that you've seen that has indicated to you that they are there?
Yeah, there have been. I'm going to say that I'm not, principally a Mars researcher. I'm answering your questions more or less as a layperson. It hasn't been the main focus of any research that I've done on it, but I've seen from Richard Hoagland and other people, other researchers, evidence for some kind of human-like civilization on Mars, whether it's the pyramids of Sidonia or the face on Mars, and what to speak of reports from modern UFO and alien researchers about different kinds of entities coming from different parts of the cosmos in our solar system, including Mars, or from even other galaxies.
Yeah, it would seem that even if they weren't native to Mars, perhaps it's an outpost, right? Because that would make sense if you're studying us.
Now, one thing I'll say about archaeology, even professional archaeologists in their conferences are talking about these things. As you mentioned in introducing me, I'm a member of the World Archaeological Congress, which is one of the world's largest international organizations of archaeologists. And they hold a big conference every 4 years, and I've been to almost all of them. And in one of them that took place, I think it was a few years ago, not too long ago, but maybe in 2008, I think it was, they had a whole section on extraterrestrial archaeology because they are wondering, what to do with the stuff, that we and other countries have sent to the moon, Mars, and other planets. If you go up there and you find these remains, who do they belong to? What country do they belong to? What museum will get them, or whatever? So there are actually international treaties about these things. And what I found pretty amazing was that they're talking not only about stuff that we've sent out there, but they're talking about what if we find things that we didn't send out there, like a satellite from some other planetary system, in Earth orbit, or something on Mars that we didn't send there. What are we going to do with that? So I think it's interesting that even professional archaeologists are talking about these things behind the scenes in their professional conferences.
Astrobiology, astroarchaeology are terms that are being used in mainstream science, and it seems to be something that's going to be taken more seriously. Now, if Elon Musk were to say to you, hey, Michael, the first landing party on Mars, I want a couple of people who think outside the box. Would you want to come and land? Would you, Michael, do it?
If Elon Musk calls me up and offers me that, I would go.
Wow. And what about family objections?
That's not an issue. Probably there might be some health issues. I might have, some, I'm 72 years old at the present moment. So maybe, I don't know exactly how long they're saying it would go to. I think, what is it, about a year and a half or?
Well, initially it's going to be a settlement, and I don't know. I'm pretty sure the first landing crew party is not coming back. So that would be a one-way ticket. So we could change it to a two-way ticket. Then maybe you would say yes, right?
Oh no, not necessarily true.
Okay. So I have a question from the comments section, and I know we're still a little off topic here, but this is from Bonnie Rogers. Do you think the moon is hollow and that there is life on the moon?
I think there's life on the moon. Whether it's hollow or not, I don't know, but I think there definitely is some kind of life associated with the moon planet. And as I was mentioning in the connection with Mars, it may be that these life forms can deal with subtle energies in such a way that their forms are made of types of energies that we might not be able to perceive in our ordinary sense perception.
And so that really opens up Pandora's box, right? And how does one even go about searching for that? We're still trying to figure out what happened here on Earth and what our history is here. I have another question from an anonymous, and it is it possible, considering your wealth of research, what do you consider your most significant find?
It's a good question. And in one sense, the most significant thing for me is there are hundreds of cases of archaeological evidence for extreme human antiquity. Just to single out one of them as being the most important isn't for me the way to proceed. But if somebody asks me, one of my favorite cases is the California gold mine discoveries. Gold was discovered in California in the 19th century. Miners from around the world went there. They were digging tunnels into the sides of mountains like Table Mountain near the town of Sonora and the Sierra Nevada mountains. And deep inside their tunnels, the miners were finding human bones and human artifacts. And these were collected by Dr. J.D. Whitney, who was the chief government geologist of California. And he published a massive report about them. It was published by Harvard University in the year 1880. Now, what makes these discoveries so interesting to me is that they're found in layers of rock that modern geologists consider to be about 50 million years old. So it's a very well documented case. It's all the process of how it was filtered out by the supporters of the theory of human evolution is also very well documented. There was a contemporary of Dr. Whitney, Dr. William Holmes, who was a physical anthropologist working at the Smithsonian Institution in Washington. And he said if Dr. Whitney had understood the theory of human evolution, he wouldn't have published that report. In other words, he should have known it really wasn't possible that humans like us were existing so long ago, 50 million or more years ago. So some of the artifacts from the California gold mines are still in the collection of the Museum of Anthropology at the University of California at Berkeley. And I've been in there, I've seen them, I've photographed them. They're not shown to the public. They're kept in a storage building several miles from the museum, but they are still there. And so I find that that's a really interesting case for me.
How did you get access to them?
Well, it was like a whole process. Like I'm a member of the World Archaeological Congress, and as I said, they have a big conference every 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the conferences was coming up. So I made a proposal to present a paper about the California gold mine discoveries at this conference. It was accepted by the academic committee of the conference. So they sent me a letter, saying that this is approved for presentation at this meeting of professional archaeologists. So I was able to go to the museum officials and show them, okay, I've been approved to present a paper on this topic at a meeting of the World Archaeological Congress. So it's bona fide research. And okay, then they said, okay, yes, you can come, but you have to, they gave me a date, a week or two later. You have to come to the museum, go to the catalogs, and pick out exactly what objects you want to see and make a formal research request. So I did that. I live in Los Angeles. Berkeley is a little north of here. So on the appointed day, I flew up to San Francisco, went over to Berkeley, went to the museum, went in, looked through their catalog. They had a card catalog. And I went through and I want to see specimen 9876A from collection this or that. You have to do your homework beforehand.
And little by little, you got that. Michael, hold it right here because we're at the second break, but we'll come back on the other side. And I do have a question for Michael, and that is, what are humans? The further we go back, that tree seems to get pretty thick. And I wonder if some of these artifacts that we look at in the past are made by something other than what we would consider human. So I'll ask Michael on the other side, and I'll try to get to your comments in the comment section. But as a friendly reminder, in the last half hour, we'll open up the Paranormal Radio app lines for you to call in and ask your questions. So we look forward to that. Alan B. Smith, I'll see you on the Inverted Upside Down.
Are you ready? I am the ocean and you are the sky. I need to swim free and you need to fly. I live for daylight, you live for the night. You love to wander and I want to be right, but the sweetness in me needs love, bitter in you.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now. The Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
Are you still at it?
Yeah, I need more speed.
This baby's fast.
My dad's fast. He's scary fast.
You really think you could beat him?
Yeah, because I drink more tea than he does.
Yeah, right.
Pal, it's the tea that makes you go. Oh. Hey, Dad.
Kiddo, you have to drink a lot more tea to be faster than me.
Drink the tea that makes you go. Life Change Tea. You may not need as much as Dad. You never know. GetTheTea.com. Log on to GetTheTea.com.
Welcome to the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, thekgradb.com. Here you'll find great new content, including the KGRA Classics, great shows from our archives. You'll be able to see the show times and information so you can see what show is currently on air. the on-air live button. So just go to this section and you'll be able to hear the show live with exceptional sound quality. We also have the Vault section. Make sure to subscribe to get access to great content and special features. We have the make content for our latest news and events, so make sure to sign up and you can be part of our forum. So make sure to check out the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, the KGRADB.com. We look forward to seeing you there, and we hope that you enjoy the new website.
Mainstream media's most wanted. KGRARadio.com.
I'm a mess, but a hot mess. Dreaming with my eyes open. I'm a mess, but a hot mess. I'm not scared of being broken. I've been going and I don't wanna be found. Go on and I don't wanna be found. I live for the night.
And we definitely live for the night here on Paranormal Now. Thank you all for joining me every Sunday, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on KGRA Live. You can go to the KGRADB.com website for all show updates on this wonderful network of ours. And I'm grateful to say that Carol Carl from Behind the Obsidian Curtain on KGRA has invited me to be on a guest. And I will be there Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we'll be talking about the documentary Aliens and Aliens versus Bigfoot that I was involved with. It was a really, really fun documentary to be involved with. And I love expanding beyond what we think the conversation is supposed to be about. In a sense, it's kind of alternative to the alternative. And taking us out of the break was music by Lizette Xavier. If you want to find out more about Lizette's music, go to lizetteXavier.com. All right, we're back with Michael Cremo. Michael, it's great hanging out with you tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate your input and your perspectives because, you know, we don't have to have one point of view on this subject, correct?
Hopefully that's the case.
All right. And I do want to know, because when you talk about human presence, artifacts found millions or tens and hundreds of thousands of years ago, are we talking about the same human like us?
In terms of modern science, they attribute certain types of artifacts to anatomically modern humans. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for example, there was a recent case where archaeologists looking at stone tools and bone tools found at Olduvai Gorge, they found a bone harpoon point with a barbed point. And they consider bone tools or weapons to be something that only humans of our type do. Stone tools, very simple and crude ones, they think could be done by some other type of hominin, maybe Homo erectus or Homo habilis or Neanderthals or Denisovans or whatever. Yeah. So, but bone tools, they've traditionally assigned only to humans like us. So they found this barbed bone spear point or harpoon point. Mm-hmm. You know, the idea being that if you had a spear with this point on it, you know, you hit a fish in the water, then you can pull the fish out because the barbs on the point will keep it on.
Sure.
And, you know, it's about, they found this thing and they think it's about 800,000 years old, which is before the time of anatomically modern humans. Right. So they're kind of presented with a dilemma. Usually, the way they react to these things is to say, well, maybe Homo erectus was more advanced than we thought. They were actually making barbed harpoon points from bone, like we used to think only modern humans did. Another way to look at it, which is the way I would propose looking at it, is, well, maybe humans have been around for longer than we think possible. And in the years since Forbidden Archaeology was originally published, things have gone in that direction. When I first brought the book out, scientists, that was in 1993, they thought humans like us have been around for 100,000 years. And by the 2000s, they thought, okay, maybe we've been around for 200,000 years. And now, 10 years later, they're thinking 300,000 years. So it seems that every 10 years or so, they're pushing a human presence back by about 100,000 years. And you were mentioning before the break, you were kind of previewing the question that, okay, you've got so many types of hominins that were existing. Maybe it was one of them that made things, or maybe it was humans like us. How do we tell? That again is something that Forbidden Archaeology was talking about long ago. The idea that humans like us may have coexisted with other types of hominins, ape men, like Australopithecus, Homo habilis, Neanderthals. And at that time, most scientists were thinking in a more strictly linear way, that first came the primitive apes and monkeys, and then came Australopithecus, which was very ape-like, but was bipedal, could stand on two legs like a human being, but otherwise was very ape-like. And then there came Homo erectus, and then the Neanderthals, and then anatomically modern humans, just in a straight line. Now they've come, in Forbidden Archaeology, we were talking about coexistence. Now they've come to that position, which you kind of outlined in your question, that it's very complicated. There were a lot of different entities coexisting at the same time. And I would throw your Sasquatch into the mix too. So
I was going to ask you about that. What is your take on Sasquatch?
Well, the ancient Sanskrit writings of India say there are 400,000 human-like species scattered throughout the cosmos. And these would include creatures which are described as vanaras, forest dwellers, which have ape-like bodies, but human-like intelligence, ability to speak languages, and things like that. So I don't think this idea of Sasquatch or Bigfoot or Yeti or Almas have different names in different cultures. It's not a new idea. It's an idea that's there in different ancient wisdom traditions. And I think they did exist. According to the ancient Sanskrit writings, they had paranormal powers in addition to human-like intelligence, but they had ape-like bodies, and they were coexisting with humans like us. So I think that's been the case for a long, long time, that today we're coexisting on this planet with different species of apes and monkeys and gorillas, orangutans, and Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Yeti. And the same is true in the past. Humans like us were coexisting. It's described in the ancient literatures that these ape-man-like creatures, these Vanaras, had a very simple material culture. In other words, they were using stones and stone tools and weapons and things like that. So, yes, it's possible that some of the very crude stone tools and weapons were made and used by humanoid but not anatomically modern human types of beings.
Is this source material, whether it's text from India or the Middle East or
Native American Indians?
Native American, yeah, all this resource, would be called mythology. So how do you look at that and decide what seems legitimate and what seems like pure fabricated storytelling?
Well, here's what I do. I turn it into a hypothesis. I don't expect archaeologists to accept a statement from some ancient book as evidence. But what I can do, and I have done, is make a hypothesis. If what these ancient wisdom traditions are saying is true about, say, human antiquity, then we should expect to find reports of archaeologists and other scientists finding such evidence. And my methodology has been to, okay, let's look at all those reports and see what they say. Not what's just in the textbooks today, but go back into the archives and look at all the reports. And what we find is there are such reports. So that's how I deal with it in terms of my outreach to people who may not be interested in what ancient wisdom traditions have to say at the present moment. But maybe if they're confronted with evidence that's consistent with what some ancient book says, they might think, well, maybe there's some value to it after all. Maybe it isn't just some mythic invention.
We have a question in the comment section on Facebook, and I think they want to know, what is your take on Göbekli Tepe?
That's a very interesting place in the country of what's now Turkey. And the really interesting thing about it is that the discoveries consist of stone columns that have elaborate carvings of animals and different geometric designs and things of a type that is indicative of some level of civilization and culture. The interesting thing is that it's about 13,000 years old as far as I've seen so far in terms of the scientific dating of it. And that's interesting because if you have some signs of civilization like that, arrangements of these stone columns with elaborate carvings of animals and humans on them, it's very interesting because normally they would say civilization began about 5,000 or 6,000 years ago. So it's
changing, isn't it?
It's a step in the right direction. I regard it as a small step in the right direction. I think the evidence for human civilization could be taken even further back in time, but I regard it as a progressive development in modern archaeology.
My wife and I were watching a movie recently about the Sutton Hoo discovery in England. And at the time, that was breakthrough, right? It's still considered one of the biggest archaeological finds of all time. And what it did was it pushed back our understanding of, if nothing else, Western history and the civilizations there in Europe. So, can we expect another Sutton Hoo, another Göbekli Tepe that's even further back in time?
Absolutely. I've been to the British Museum in London, and I've seen the Sutton Hoo mask, the golden mask and other objects that were found in this burial of some Saxon, I guess, king. And what's really interesting about Sutton Hoo is there's a paranormal element to it. The discovery was made on the estate of an English family, and the lady of the house basically had some dream in which she saw the figure of this ancient Saxon king, and she kind of determined there were a number of mounds on the property of this estate, and she kind of determined, well, it must be this mound, and she got an amateur archaeologist to come and start conducting a dig, and eventually it was the remains of the Saxon king were found, and then they brought in some professional archaeologists to deal with it. But I like the psychic archaeology aspect of it, and that's a whole other topic like that I've gotten into, this whole topic of psychic archaeology.
Well, that was my next question. So if people have visions that lead them to something like this, does Michael Cremo have intuition or visions? Do you have dreams that inform your work and what direction to go in?
I would say intuition does play a part. And when I first started this research, I had an assistant who was working with me, and I said, I was looking at the history of archaeology as it's known today, or at the time I started the research, and I noticed that Darwin wrote his book about the origin of species in 1859, and people started talking about human evolution, humans evolving from apes and monkeys. And I thought, okay, that means they're going to be looking for evidence of an intermediate between the apes and monkeys and the modern humans. So nothing like that was discovered until 1894. So it was about 30 or 40 years. I thought that's a pretty big gap. What's going on here? So I just had this intuition. I told my research assistant, go to the library at UCLA. We were living in Los Angeles, still am. So he went there, and I told him to get some textbooks of anthropology from the 1860s, 1870s, 1890s. So he did that, and I studied them, and I found that actually scientists were making numerous discoveries, but they were finding not the missing link, not the intermediate form between humans and apes. They were finding evidence that anatomically modern humans existed millions of years ago. And these things were printed in professional scientific journals of the time. And that was because they hadn't really fixed the timeline of human evolution. Now, in 1894, when Eugene Dubois discovered the Java man fossils at a place called Trinil in Indonesia, he found an ape-like skull and a human-like femur or thigh bone. He kind of put the two together and said, this is the Java ape man.
Mm-hmm.
Ape-like forehead, skull, and human-like body below the neck. So that became accepted. It turned out it was about 800,000 years old. So then they had to decide, the scientific community had to decide, well, what are we going to do with this other evidence that accumulated in the 1860s, 1870s, 1880s, 1890s, like the California gold mine discoveries that were made in 1880. What are we going to do with that stuff? Now that we have our timeline fixed, we've got the intermediate, the missing link at 800,000 years. That means you can't have any anatomically modern humans existing before that. So that's when the process of knowledge filtration really kicked in. They started just casting these earlier discoveries into oblivion, from which they've never emerged except in books like Forbidden Archaeology. And then after that time, this is around the turn of the century, 1900 or so, whenever scientists would find something that looked like it was made by anatomically humans or was part of an anatomically modern human, they would interpret it in such a way that it fit their current theories. Like I was giving that example of that barbed spear point, which normally they would attribute to anatomically modern humans, but it's 800,000 years old. According to them, humans like us did not exist at that time. So they interpret it as belonging to Homo erectus or something. Another, if you allow, I tend to run on and on. You can interrupt me. Another recent case was in 2016. Archaeologists at Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania, in East Africa, discovered a finger bone in an excavation they were conducting. And it was found in layers of rock about 1,800,000 years old. And they compared this finger bone, they did elaborate measurements, and they compared it to the measurements of the same finger bone from different species of apes and monkeys, chimpanzees, gorillas, orangutans. And they also compared it with the same finger bone in different species of hominids, Australopithecus, Homo habilis, Homo erectus, and they compared it with anatomically the same finger bone in anatomically modern humans. They found it was different from the apes and monkeys, different from all the hominids, the ape men, but it fit exactly in the modern human group. And here's what they said in their publication. It was published in Nature Communications, which is a very prominent scientific journal. They said, this finger bones, the OH86 is the designation. The OH86 finger bone is of the modern human type, like modern Homo sapiens, but we cannot call it Homo sapiens because of its geological age of 1,800,000 years. So to me, that's a perfect example of how the knowledge filtration process operates. They've got this evidence staring them in the face. It's a bone, it's a human-like, totally modern human-like in form, but we can't consider that because of its age. I would say, why not? You've got, to me, I would take it, well, here's evidence for anatomically modern humans existing 1,800,000 years ago. So if this just happened once or twice, maybe you could overlook it.
Sure.
But, it happens a whole lot. It happens hundreds of times.
All right. If you're listening tonight and you want to find out more about Michael Cremo, go to www.mcremo.com and you can get all his books there. Background. Michael, do you have any talks or seminars coming up?
I have different interviews coming up. If people want to know about them, they can look at that mcremo.com website, look at the schedule link, and they'll see which interviews are coming up. Because of COVID, everything's online now. I'm really looking forward to the day that I'll be able to speak in front of an audience of live people. So that would be, I'm really looking forward to that happening.
Yes,
sometime soon.
Us live people are hoping to attend such occasions with the likes of yourself and those who are fellow enthusiasts of all this. But my God, I do miss it's funny, we call it human contact, and really you're in a room with a bunch of strangers, and there's just something inherent in that experience that is deeply satisfying as a human. And I would suppose that that's part of the archaeological research, right? Because when you, like Homo florenziensis, when you're looking for evidence of that, they're going through these layers of caves and you're looking for community, essentially, right? Fire and bone fragments of animals that were hunted. So that communal aspect of us humans, rather than being like a lone panther, wandering through the woods, that serves future generations to find our past and find out who we were. You mentioned earlier, and I just want to go back to this quickly, that some people theorize that perhaps we had time travelers in the past come back in time, and that explains these spheres from 2 point whatever billion years ago. And I thought that if that were true, perhaps it was sort of a cosmic joke. I could just imagine some teenagers jumping in a time machine, dropping off these balls and saying, okay, now let's see what happens when we get back and see if we can throw them for a loop.
Yeah.
Are there things out there that even for someone like you really throw you for a loop?
Let's see. I think there are, but I have to find some way to express how that's true. You're a really good interviewer. You asked a question nobody's ever asked me before. Because usually I've heard the question 100 times before, and I have my answers. That is something I'm going to have to think about. Like, has anything really thrown me? That is an excellent question.
Well, related to that work, at least from the mythological point of view, I mean, you seem to be a spiritual person. and like Buddha, right? Searching for the I. What is the I? Who is the I? When you're searching spiritually, what is most challenging for you in that regard? What have you had to try to work through to kind of overcome and be the better Michael that you want to be?
Controlling the mind is very important. That's why I engage each day in about 2 hours of meditation. And if I'm able to, because the mind has a tendency to wander around to this topic and this activity and that activity, and just become absorbed in so many different topics that you begin to lose your sense of priorities, what's really important in life. So taking some time each day for my practice of meditation, I find very helpful. And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, that I kind of rely on intuition in a sense, that in order to do this research, to do this writing, I more or less have to get into a certain state of mind. You could call it a trance or whatever, a focused state of mind where I'm able to put the words together in a way that makes sense, not only to me, but to others. So that is, something that I'm always working on to improve my focus.
Yeah. In your research, like all scientific studies, there is the community of input, right? And collaboration. Are there other researchers in your field that have been, markedly helpful towards you and your own hypotheses?
Graham Hancock is one such person. Now, I wouldn't want to suggest that he endorses every single thing that I say. He's got his area of research and he works on it. I've got mine. I work on it. But he got in touch with me a few years ago, and we got into some discussions about my work. And I asked him if he would write a foreword for my, at that time, next book, The Hidden History of the Human Race. And he was kind enough to do that, to write a really positive endorsement of my work. So I really appreciated that. There were others in the media area that were kind to me in the very beginning. I think the first major radio show that I did was with Laura Lee, who was working out of Washington in the early 1990s. And then Art Bell also, he was very helpful in getting things happening. And then there was a lady named Helen Hunt, who was head of a little organization called the Louisiana Mounds Society. In other words, Indian mounds. And, she was a wonderful Southern lady. She called me up on the phone once and said, Michael, I really love your book, Forbidden Archaeology. And, she said, you should get in touch with this television producer I know in New York named Bill Cote. And he's making a documentary. And I think your book would be very interesting to him. So I did that. I got in touch with Bill Cote and sent him Forbidden Archaeology, and he was fascinated by the book. And he came out and interviewed me and my co-author, Richard Thompson, for a documentary called The Mysterious Origins of Man, which aired on NBC. And he'd also previously done The Mystery of the Sphinx with John Anthony West and other kinds of documentaries. So that was, these little networks that take place, to me, it's just amazing. There's something going on that I'm not completely in charge of, but I take the opportunities when a step is put in front of me. I try to take it. So that resulted in my first major media coverage.
Well, and I think
when that documentary was aired. So yeah, I am grateful. I think there is a community aspect to this whole alternative archaeology area, and it involves the writers and the researchers. It involves the people who are putting these things out on the air through their platforms, whether it's their podcast or their radio show. Fantastic. Or their TV show. And then there is the people who are interested in these questions, who get excited about them, who are enthusiastic about them and want to see change, make change. There is, as you say, a community aspect to the whole project.
Yeah, and the collective it'll serve you well. And I think for those listening, cable and network TV back in the day was a big deal. They hit much larger numbers than we think of in terms of cable now before the internet. So, Michael, I want to get our first caller in, and this is Ronald from Minnesota. Ronald, you are on the air.
Hi, Alan. What a great show. What a great guest, and thank you for Michael being here. Thank you. And a great topic. I had a question for you. All of a sudden, when you were talking about the meditation, 2 hours meditation, I believe that we're all connected from our physical selves here on planet Earth, and also from the future or the past or whatever you want to call it. I think we're all connected on a electrical communication line, if you will. And I think that we can all communicate using telepathy or using electrical connection of some sort without the phone, like what we're doing right here. But I'm talking about we can send a message up and that can get to somewhere, and someone will actually get it, and then they'll get it and think, why did I think that? And then they might send it back. We might get confirmation at some point, and don't be surprised if that does happen. It could. And what I'm getting into is, when you meditate, who are you connecting to when you meditate?
Well, Ronald, I'm connecting with what I call the super soul, because I believe there's a source of all conscious beings. We have, as you say, we're networked with each other, and I think, you have a really good insight there. You say it's sort of like the phones. So I think a lot of our modern technology is the way that our civilization today is trying to imitate abilities that people once had naturally. And they're doing it in such a way that it can be monetized and controlled and everything like that. But I think you have a very important insight there.
Well, thank you very much. Again, very, very great show. Thank you, Ellen, for having a great guest. And thank you, Bill, for the phone call, and have a great night.
All right. Thank you so much, Ron. Have a good night. Appreciate it. So I also have a question for you. When you're looking back, are we looking back in time through the wrong lens? Meaning, when we're looking for evidence in the far past, are we looking at it through a modern perspective, and are we overlooking something?
That's always possible. It's sort of well known by historians of science and philosophers of science that our own theoretical preconceptions, our own knowledge filters can influence how we interpret things from the past. I would just say, in regard to that, you have to then look at what are the consequences of doing that. So I would say, looking at myself, that what I'm proposing, the lens that I'm looking at the past through, is dedicated to the principle that we are all beings of pure consciousness originally, which means we're all related to each other. We're not, we shouldn't be, we are, but we shouldn't be dividing ourselves into different competing groups based on what I would consider to be superficial features such as race and nationality and gender and this, that, and the other. That is, beings of pure consciousness, we're all related, and we should be, and we could be, satisfying our material needs in the most simple, natural, efficient, and fair and equitable way possible. And that's the lens that I'm looking through. That's what I'm looking for. So everyone will have to consider what are the consequences of the lens they're looking through.
No, go ahead, Michael.
No, I tend to talk too much.
Not at all. We're very interested. Waiting here with bated breath for your next word. So I will ask this, building on what you just said. Does uncovering our past, learning more about who we once were or what we accomplished or how long we've been around for, does that help us move forward as a species?
I think it does. It's actually quite a good question. What does it really matter how long we've been around? And aren't these just some questions to be argued about by some scholars in their ivory towers? How does it affect it? I think it does affect us because of the question of identity. On the basis of our identity, we set our goals, our values, our objectives in life. We all do it. It's sort of based, if I'm an American man, then I behave in a certain way. I have certain goals and objectives in life according to how I identify myself. So today's scientists have dictated to us an extremely materialistic concept of self. We're machines made of molecules. Basically, we're purely material beings, and that's it. We're evolved apes. Deal with it. So that type of identity leads to extremely materialistic goals where people are very, very self-interested. They organize themselves in competing groups. And I think this is a source of a lot of the conflict and violence that we see in the world on the level of individuals, classes, races, religions, nations, etc. And I think it's also the driving force behind our environmental crisis. overproduction and overconsumption of material things. So our sense of identity really does play into these things for all of us. It's not just a topic for a few philosophers and scientists to argue uselessly about. So if by learning about the past, we learn that there's evidence that shows the current theories of human origins are wrong, and those theories include ideas about what our identity really is. If we had another set of ideas based on our study of the evidence from the past that resulted in seeing ourselves not as machines made of molecules, but as beings of pure consciousness, then we would see we're all related. We would be less likely to divide ourselves into groups that hate each other and so on and so forth.
I agree with you in that regard. I guess the one caveat I have is that you have to widen the net. So collectively as a species all across the planet, you have to be teaching that and passing that down to the point where, kind of like the virus, right? Where we have enough people who have an immunity to it that you can kind of snuff it out. Viruses pop up again and again, but you can keep moving forward as a species. And it seems to me our inclination for violence, it comes from a behavioral place. Someone can experience a trauma, be mistreated, and it can grow out from there. So it seems that it's a sociological solution, and I'm wondering, based on the evidence that you've seen, do you think that there's any hope for an evolutionary solution, that we can get to the point where we just don't even have to, sit there and try to convince everybody to get along all the time?
Yes, I think that's possible. And I think it's also helpful to have examples and models, groups of people who have eco communities, or groups of people who are very diverse but are still able to get along with each other and give real choices to people. So that's I think that actually is going on there. Now, maybe they're very much in the minority at the present moment, but I believe there are such groups of people and individuals who are kind of moving in that direction. But yeah, practical examples you need to, demonstration communities, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Okay, so we have Anna from Canada on the line. Welcome to Paranormal, Anna. How are you?
Hi.
Hey.
This is a question for Mr. Cremo.
Sure.
Discussing hominids and things. Now, Sasquatch. Does he have any theories on why Sasquatch not only is here, but why he hides in the forest? I have my ideas. I think Sasquatch took off. He said enough of this. I think they were using him as a workhorse, and him and the wife split off into the forest where, of course, nobody's going to go find them, and that's where they've been living. What is his take on Sasquatch?
Michael?
I think the caller is right that Sasquatch doesn't like what's going on out here outside the deep forest, so we rarely see them here. I would say that the Sasquatch and other beings, there does appear to be a paranormal element connected with them, and as our host has been mentioning, there's also a connection with extraterrestrials. So
yes,
that's
I go
my take on it.
searching Sasquatch, and I've got pictures of an 18-inch print.
And have you seen associated events between Sasquatch, UFOs, or anything like that, Anna?
Funny you say that, because I went squatching with another squatcher, and before we went, we agreed that we would both take the same picture.
Okay.
We could compare.
Mm-hmm.
And I took a picture, and not only did we get Sasquatch, a family of 4 Sasquatch with little baby prints, as well as mom and another, I'd say 7 or 8 year old Sasquatch. But I took a picture and got a blue round orb where there was no sunlight coming in, so there was no reason. And he took a picture right after me.
Mm-hmm.
His blue orb was kind of square, and he had what appeared to be a Sasquatch head to the shoulders.
So you took this at the same moment?
Well, I took mine, and then he took his.
Okay, see, that to me does speak to a mystery, and I think that there is other evidence like that. The ability for Bigfoot to kind of just slip in and out. You turn your head and she or he is gone in an instant. And I think that sometimes this is beyond the abilities of Tolkien's hobbits that can walk genteelly through the woods. They seem to quite literally disappear, and I've always found that fascinating. Anna, thank you so much for calling in. I really appreciate it.
All right, you have a good night.
Okay, you too. So Michael, have you seen evidence for Bigfoot that is convincing, or just keeping an open mind?
I've seen evidence that to me is convincing. I actually, in Forbidden Archaeology, I have a whole chapter on evidence for living ape men. That's my way of addressing the Sasquatch Bigfoot topic. So I kind of went through the literature about it, and I kind of took what I regard as the best scientifically reported evidence for these creatures.
Well, everyone should go out there and check out Michael's books. There's so many great ones: Forbidden Archaeology's Impact, Forbidden Archaeology, The Forbidden Archaeologist, and The Hidden History of Human Race. Michael, thank you so much for coming on tonight. I really appreciate it. It was a fascinating conversation.
Yeah, I'll just mention that to any of the listeners that there's another book that I've put out. It's called My Science, My Religion. It's a collection of 24 papers that I've presented at international scientific conferences about all of these topics we've been discussing. And some people are very amazed that I'm able to do that. But if anyone purchases a copy of that book from my website, they'll also have the opportunity to get a free copy of Bhagavad Gita if they want it. That's one of the ancient Sanskrit classics that have inspired a lot of my work.
All right. So to find out about Michael's work, go to mcremo.com. Michael, thank you so much. And everybody listening tonight, thank you for tuning into Paranormal Now every Sunday, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on kgradb.com, your official contact for the best in alternative talk radio. Stay tuned for Tracy Austin and her guest, Craig Babasso, and special thanks to KGRA Head of Operations, Eric Brager, and our producer, the amazing Bill Skywatcher. Until next time, everyone, live in the mystery.